You think you know what betrayal looks like? Try being 7 months pregnant, trapped in a metal tube at 40,000 feet with your husband, and the woman he swore was just an assistant. When that mistress decided to cross the line, when she actually reached out and pulled the pregnant wife's hair in a fit of jealous rage, she thought she had won. She thought the husband's silence was her trophy. But she forgot one massive detail. The man sitting quietly across the aisle wasn't just a passenger. He was the billionaire brother who signed every check, owned the jet, and held the deed to their entire lives. And he was about to wake up. The humidity at Teterboro Airport was suffocating, clinging to Charlotte's skin like a damp sheet. But the heat outside was nothing compared to the chill radiating from the man standing next to her. "Do you have to walk so slow?" Lucas snapped, checking his Patek Philippe watch for the 3rd time in a minute. "We have a schedule, Charlotte. The pilot isn't going to wait forever." Charlotte placed a protective hand over her 7-month baby bump, wincing as a sharp kick radiated against her ribs. "I'm carrying your son, Lucas. I'm moving as fast as I can. And why are we even taking the jet?" "You said this was a quick business trip to Aspen. A commercial flight would have been..." "Commercial?" Lucas scoffed, adjusting the collar of his bespoke Italian suit. "I am a Rochefort. We don't fly commercial. Besides, Sophia needs space to work on the merger files during the flight. We can't have prying eyes looking at sensitive documents." Sophia. The name landed like a physical blow. Charlotte looked up toward the sleek Gulfstream G650, waiting on the tarmac. Standing at the bottom of the stairs, looking effortlessly glamorous in a cream-colored silk jumpsuit that probably cost more than Charlotte's first car, was Sophia. She wasn't just the executive assistant. She was the shadow in Charlotte's marriage. The late-night texts, the weekend conferences, the perfume that lingered on Lucas's shirts, a scent of jasmine and expensive trouble. "Mrs. Rochefort," Sophia said, as they approached, her voice dripping with a sweetness that didn't reach her cold, calculating blue eyes. "You look positively glowing. Or is that just the perspiration? It is terribly humid." "I'm fine, Sophia," Charlotte said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her legs. "I didn't know you were coming. Lucas said this was a family trip." Sophia smirked, a tiny venomous curl of red lips. "Oh, the business never sleeps, Charlotte. Lucas simply cannot function without my organization." She placed a manicured hand on Lucas's bicep, squeezing it familiarly. Lucas didn't pull away. In fact, he leaned into it. "Let's just get on board," Lucas muttered, avoiding his wife's eyes. "Sebastian is already inside. You know how he gets if we keep him waiting." Charlotte froze. "Sebastian is coming." Lucas rolled his eyes. "It's his plane, Charlotte. Of course he's coming. He's heading to the Aspen Lodge to oversee the renovations. Just stay out of his way. He's been in a foul mood since the board meeting in Tokyo." Sebastian Rochefort, the older brother, the enigma, while Lucas was the playboy face of Rochefort Enterprises, charming, reckless, and hungry for fame. Sebastian was the spine. He was the majority shareholder, the brutal negotiator, the man who had turned their father's millions into billions. He rarely spoke to Charlotte. In the 3 years she had been married to Lucas, Sebastian had been a distant, intimidating figure who watched everything with dark, unreadable eyes. They boarded the jet. The interior was a palace of beige leather and mahogany. Sitting in the far back, wearing a black turtleneck and reading a thick leather-bound dossier, was Sebastian. He didn't look up when they entered. He simply lifted a finger, signaling the flight attendant to close the door. "Take the seat by the window, Charlotte," Lucas ordered, pointing to a single seat mid-cabin. "Sophia and I need the conference table." Charlotte watched as her husband ushered his mistress to the spacious four-top table, immediately pouring her a glass of Dom Perignon. Charlotte lowered herself into her seat, the leather creaking under her weight. She asked the flight attendant for water. As the engines whined to life and the jet began its taxi, Charlotte looked across the aisle. Sebastian had closed his dossier. He was looking out the window, his jaw set like granite. But for a split second, as the plane turned, she saw his reflection in the glass. He wasn't looking at the runway. He was watching Lucas and Sophia. And his expression wasn't just cold, it was predatory. 2 hours into the flight, the atmosphere in the cabin was toxic. Charlotte had been trying to read a printing book the first 40 days, but her concentration was shattered by the raucous laughter coming from the conference table. Lucas and Sophia had moved past the work phase and were now on their second bottle of champagne. "Oh, Lucas, stop!" Sophia giggled, her voice shrill and piercing. "You're so bad that VP never stood a chance. He was a dinosaur." Lucas bragged, his voice slurring slightly. "I told Sebastian we needed to cut the dead weight. Out with the old, in with the new." He clinked his glass against Sophia's, his eyes raking over her body. Charlotte felt the bile rise in her throat. She struggled to shift her position. Her back was aching terribly. She reached for her bag to get her prenatal vitamins, but her hand slipped and the bottle of pills tumbled onto the floor, rolling toward the center aisle. She groaned, unbuckling her seatbelt. It was difficult to bend down. As she reached for the bottle, the plane hit a pocket of air. The sudden jolt threw her off balance, and she stumbled forward, bracing herself on the edge of the conference table to avoid falling. Her hand accidentally knocked over Sophia's half-full flute of champagne. The liquid splashed onto the sleeve of Sophia's silk jumpsuit. The cabin went silent. "You clumsy cow!" Sophia shrieked, jumping up. "Do you have any idea how much this costs? This is vintage silk. I'm sorry," Charlotte stammered, gripping the table for support, her face pale. The plane jolted. "I was just trying to get my medicine." "Medicine?" Sophia sneered. "You're not sick, Charlotte. You're just fat and useless. You waddle around like a penguin and expect everyone to bow down because you managed to get pregnant." "Sophia, that's enough," Charlotte said, a spark of anger finally igniting in her chest. "I am his wife. You are an employee. Remember your place." Sophia's eyes went wide. The audacity of this quiet, mousy woman, speaking back to her, seemed to snap something inside her. She looked at Lucas. "Are you going to let her talk to me like that?" Lucas, his face flushed with alcohol and arrogance, glared at Charlotte. "Apologize to her, Charlotte. You ruined her outfit." Charlotte stared at her husband in disbelief. "What, I'm 7 months pregnant with your child, Lucas. I almost fell. She just insulted me." "I said apologize," Lucas shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "You're always making a scene. You're embarrassing me." "I'm embarrassing you." Charlotte's voice broke. "You brought your mistress on a family trip." The word hung in the air. "Mistress." Sophia's face twisted into a mask of pure rage. "You little witch." Before Charlotte could react, Sophia lunged. She didn't slap her. It was more primal, more vicious. Sophia's hand shot out and grabbed a handful of Charlotte's long brown hair. She yanked hard, twisting her grip up. Charlotte screamed, her hands flying up to protect her head, her body twisting dangerously. The pain was sharp and hot tears instantly springing to her eyes. "Lucas, help me." Lucas sat there. He sat there, glass in hand, looking annoyed rather than horrified. He didn't stand up. He didn't pull Sophia off. He took a sip of his champagne and muttered, "God, you two are dramatic." Sophia, emboldened by Lucas's inaction, yanked harder, forcing Charlotte's head down toward the table. "Who's the mistress now, huh?" "He doesn't want you. He doesn't want that brat inside you. He wants me." Charlotte sobbed, terrified for her baby, terrified of the woman pulling her hair, but most of all, shattered by the man doing nothing. "That," a deep baritone voice rumbled through the cabin, cutting through the chaos like a jagged blade, "is quite enough." The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sophia froze her hand, still tangled in Charlotte's hair. Lucas choked on his drink. From the back of the plane, Sebastian Rochefort stood up. He didn't rush. He didn't run. He walked down the aisle with the slow, terrifying grace of an apex predator, closing in on wounded prey. He stopped 3 feet from them. "Let go of her," Sebastian said. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The authority in his voice was absolute. "Sebastian, this isn't your business." Sophia spat, though her grip loosened slightly. "She attacked me first. She threw a drink on me." Sebastian took one more step. He towered over Sophia. "I will not repeat myself." Sophia released Charlotte's hair as if it were burning hot iron. Charlotte stumbled back, catching herself on a seat, gasping for air, clutching her scalp. Sebastian looked at Charlotte. His eyes, usually so cold, scanned her for injuries. "Are you hurt? Is the baby okay?" I think so," Charlotte whispered, trembling. Sebastian nodded once. Then he turned his gaze to his brother. Lucas was shrinking in his seat, trying to make himself small. "Sit down, Sophia," Sebastian ordered, not looking at her. "Buckle up. But sit." Sophia sat. Sebastian turned to Lucas. "You let her touch your wife. You let her touch an heir to the Rochefort name. Come on, Seb." Lucas laughed nervously, a high-pitched sound. "It was just a catfight. Girls being girls. You know how hormonal Charlotte is." Sebastian tilted his head. A small, cruel smile played on his lips. It was the smile of a man who had just decided to burn a village to the ground. "Hormonal," Sebastian repeated. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen once. "Pilot." "This is Sebastian. Change of flight plan." "Change of plan?" Lucas asked, confused. "We're going to Aspen. The lodge is ready." "We are not going to Aspen," Sebastian said calmly, slipping the phone back into his pocket. He sat down on the armrest of the seat opposite Lucas, crossing his arms. "We are landing in North Dakota. There's a small refueling station there. It's currently -10 degrees. "North Dakota?" Sophia shrieked. "Why?" "Because," Sebastian said, his eyes locking onto Lucas, "that is where I am leaving the trash." The descent into Minot International Airport was not the smooth glide typical of a Gulf Stream G650. The wind in North Dakota was howling, buffeting the small jet with a violence that made the champagne in Lucas's glass tremble. Or perhaps that was just Lucas's hand. "You're bluffing," Lucas stammered, staring at his brother across the aisle. Outside the window, the world was a blur of grey sky and white, endless snow. "You can't just dump us in the middle of nowhere, Sebastian. We have reservations at the St. Regis in Aspen tonight. I have calls to make." Sebastian didn't look up from his phone. He was typing a message, his thumbs moving with lethal precision. "The reservations have been cancelled. And as for your calls, I doubt anyone will be answering. What is that supposed to mean? Sophia demanded. She had stopped crying and was now trying to reapply her lipstick, though her hand shook. Sebastian, darling, surely we can talk about this. I know I got a little emotional, but Charlotte provoked me. And really, is it worth ruining a family vacation over a little hair pulling? Sebastian slowly lifted his eyes. The look he gave her was devoid of humanity. It was the look a scientist gives a cockroach before sealing the specimen jar. A little hair pulling, he repeated flatly. You assaulted a woman who is 8 months pregnant with my nephew. You endangered the future of this family. And you... He turned his dark gaze to Lucas. You watched and you drank your champagne. She's my wife, Sebastian. Lucas snapped, trying to regain some semblance of authority. I can handle my own marriage. You don't get to dictate where we land. Actually, Sebastian said, as the landing gear deployed with a mechanical thud, I do. Because this plane, it's owned by Rochefort Global Logistics, a subsidiary of the holding company I control. The fuel you're burning, paid for by my authorization. The suit you're wearing, put on a corporate card that I just suspended 45 seconds ago. Lucas went pale. He pulled out his phone, frantically opening his banking app. You can't suspend my cards. Dad set up that trust. The trust has a morality clause, Lucas. Section 4, paragraph B. Gross misconduct bringing shame or liability to the family name. Sebastian leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Assaulting a pregnant woman at 40,000 feet counts as a liability. The jet touched down with a screech of tires. The reverse thrusters roared, slowing the beast on the icy runway. As the plane taxied toward a small, desolate private hangar, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Miss Rochefort, we are wheels down in Minot. Ground temperature is 5 degrees below zero. Wind chill is -20. Thank you, Captain, Sebastian said. Open the door immediately. The jet came to a halt. The engines whined down. The flight attendant, looking terrified and avoiding eye contact with Lucas, opened the main cabin door. A blast of freezing air instantly invaded the cabin, cutting through the luxury climate control like a knife. Snowflakes swirled into the beige carpet. Get out, Sebastian said. Seb, please. Lucas's voice cracked. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the terrified whine of a little boy. I don't have a coat. I left it in the limo in New Jersey. Then you should have thought about that before you let your mistress attack your wife, Sebastian said, unbuckling his seatbelt. He stood up and walked over to Charlotte. Charlotte was shivering partly from the cold air, but mostly from shock. Sebastian removed his own jacket, a heavy cashmere-lined overcoat, and draped it gently over her shoulders. He buttoned it at her neck, his large hands, surprisingly gentle. You stay here, Charlotte, he murmured. We're taking off again in 10 minutes. I'm taking you to the specialist in Manhattan to get checked out. But... Lucas, Charlotte whispered, looking at her husband. Sebastian turned to his brother. Lucas is taking a sabbatical. To think. Sebastian grabbed Lucas's carry-on bag, a Louis Vuitton duffel, and hurled it out the open door. It landed in a snowbank with a wet thud. Out! Sebastian barked. Sophia stood up, trembling. I'm not going out there. I'm wearing silk. I'll freeze to death. Then I suggest you run fast to the terminal, Sebastian said. It's about a mile that way. He took a step toward them. The threat of physical violence was palpable. Lucas, realizing his brother was entirely serious, scrambled toward the door. He stepped onto the metal stairs and gasped as the wind hit him. This is insane! You're crazy!" Lucas screamed over the wind. Sophia followed him shrieking as her high heels slipped on the icy metal steps. They tumbled down to the tarmac, clutching their arms, the wind whipping Sophia's hair across her face. Sebastian stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at them like a king looking at exiles. "Oh, one last thing," Sebastian called out. "I've flagged your passports as stolen. Don't try to leave the country." He signaled the flight attendant. The heavy door groaned and began to close, sealing out the cold, the wind, and the two shivering figures standing in the snow. As the door latched shut, silence returned to the cabin. Sebastian sat down across from Charlotte. He poured a glass of water and handed it to her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice returning to that low, calm register. Charlotte pulled his heavy coat tighter around herself, inhaling the scent of sandalwood and safety. She looked at the man she had feared for 3 years, the man she thought was a monster. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why did you do that? He's your brother." Sebastian looked out the window as the plane began to move again, leaving Lucas and Sophia behind in the whiteout. "He is my brother by blood," Sebastian said, his jaw tightening. "But you are carrying the next generation, and unlike him, I protect what belongs to this family." He paused, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath hitch. "And nobody hurts what is mine." 72 hours later, the Rochefort Tower in Midtown Manhattan was buzzing with a nervous energy that usually preceded a stock market crash. News had leaked. Not the full story, Sebastian's PR team was too good for that. But rumors were swirling. Lucas Rochefort, stranded in North Dakota. A domestic dispute on the company jet. The tabloids were sniffing around the edges of the truth, but they had no proof. Yet. Inside the glass-walled boardroom on the 50th floor, 12 men and women in dark suits sat around a massive oval table. This was the inner circle, the board of directors. Sebastian sat at the head of the table. He was impeccable, wearing a fresh navy suit, his face a mask of calm control. To his right sat Charlotte. She felt out of place. She was wearing a modest maternity dress, her hand resting on her belly. Sebastian had insisted she be here. "You need to see this," he had told her that morning. "You need to understand that you are not a victim. You are a Rochefort." "Sebastian," old man Sterling. The chairman of the board grumbled, checking his watch. "We've been waiting for 20 minutes. Where is the president of international sales? Where is Lucas?" "Lucas is delayed," Sebastian said smoothly. "He is experiencing some travel difficulties." "Difficulties?" Sterling huffed. "We have the quarterly merger vote today. We need his proxy." "You don't need his proxy," Sebastian said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "Because as of this morning, I have filed a motion to remove him from the board." Gasps rippled around the room. "Remove him." Mrs. Halloway, the head of HR, adjusted her glasses. "On what grounds? He's a major shareholder. He's family." "On the grounds of embezzlement, gross negligence, and corporate espionage," Sebastian said. Before the board could react, the double doors at the end of the room banged open. Lucas Rochefort strode in. He looked terrible. His skin was wind-burned and peeling. He was wearing a cheap, ill-fitting parka he must have bought at a gas station in Minot. Behind him trailed Sophia, looking equally haggard, her hair matted, wearing a fierce scowl. "Don't listen to him," Lucas shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Sebastian. "He's lost his mind. He kidnapped us. He stranded us in a blizzard and tried to kill us." The boardroom went silent. Sterling looked from Lucas to Sebastian. "Is this true?" He's jealous, Sophia chimed in, stepping out from behind Lucas. He's always been jealous of Lucas. He tried to freeze us to death because of a personal disagreement. Sebastian didn't stand up. He didn't raise his voice. He simply pressed a button on the console in front of him. A large screen descended from the ceiling. I anticipated you might have a dramatic version of events, Lucas, Sebastian said, so I took the liberty of pulling the cabin security footage from the jet. Audio and video. Lucas's face drained of blood. You record inside the jet. I record inside all company assets, Sebastian said. Play. The video flickered to life. The image was crisp. Everyone in the boardroom watched in horrified silence. They saw Charlotte struggle to pick up her medicine. They saw Sophia lunge. They heard the vile insults. They saw Sophia yank Charlotte's hair, twisting her head violently. And most damning of all, they saw Lucas. They saw him sipping his champagne. They heard him say, "God, you two are dramatic." When the clip ended, the silence in the room was heavy enough to crush bones. Mrs. Halloway looked ill. He just watched. That is my wife, Lucas stammered, sweating profusely. It was a private matter. It ceased to be a private matter when you allowed an unauthorized contractor, your mistress, to physically assault a shareholder. Sebastian cut in. Shareholder? Lucas frowned. Charlotte isn't a shareholder. Sebastian turned to Charlotte. He pulled a document from the folder in front of him and placed it before her. Actually, she is. Father left 15% of the voting stock to the mother of the firstborn grandchild. It was in a dormant trust set to activate the moment the pregnancy reached the 3rd trimester. I activated it this morning. Charlotte stared at the paper. She looked at Sebastian. He had known this whole time. That means, Sebastian continued, looking at the board, that Charlotte holds more voting power than Lucas. And since Lucas failed to protect a major shareholder from assault by his own guest on company property, he is in breach of his fiduciary duty. This is ridiculous, Lucas screamed. You can't do this to me. I'm your brother, and she is your wife, Sebastian roared, slamming his hand on the table. It was the first time anyone had seen him lose his temper in a decade. The sound echoed like a gunshot. You swore a vow, Lucas, to love and cherish. Instead, you let that creature hurt her. Sebastian stood up and walked over to Sophia. She shrank back, terrified. Sophia Miller, Sebastian said. I've also done a little digging into your consulting fees. It seems you've been billing the company for services that include luxury handbags, jewelry, and a condo in Miami. That's corporate theft. He gestured to the door where 2 large security guards had quietly appeared. Escort Ms. Miller out. The police are waiting in the lobby. No! Sophia screamed as the guards grabbed her arms. Lucas, do something. You promised you'd take care of me. Lucas didn't move. He looked defeated, small and utterly alone. And as for you, Lucas, Sebastian said, adjusting his cuffs, the board will now vote on your removal. All in favor. Every hand in the room went up. Even Sterling. Even Halloway. It's unanimous, Sebastian said cold. You're out. You have until 5:00 p.m. to clear your desk. Your company car has been repossessed. Your company apartment keycard has been deactivated. Where am I supposed to go? Lucas whispered. Sebastian looked at Charlotte. That's up to your wife. It's her apartment now. All eyes turned to Charlotte. She sat there, the shock fading, replaced by old clarity she had never felt before. She looked at the man she had loved, the man who had let her be hurt. You can go to hell, Lucas, she said, her voice shaking but clear. But since I'm feeling generous, you can stay at your mother's house. In the guest room. Lucas looked at her, stunned by her spine. He opened his mouth to speak, but Sebastian stepped in between them, a literal wall of protection. "You heard her," Sebastian said. "Get out." Lucas turned and walked out the door. His head hung low, stripped of his power, his money and his pride. The room exhaled. Sebastian turned back to the table, his eyes softening only when they landed on Charlotte. "Now," Sebastian said, smoothing his tie. "Item number 2, the restructuring of the family trust to ensure the baby's future." But Charlotte wasn't listening to the business talk. She was looking at Sebastian. For the first time, she realized that the villain of the story wasn't the cold billionaire brother. He was the hero. And he had just burned down the world for her. The silence in the Rochefort penthouse was usually deafening, but for Charlotte it had become a symphony of peace. 3 weeks had passed since the boardroom execution. The sprawling Manhattan apartment, once a cold shrine to Lucas's ego filled with modern art he didn't understand, and furniture too expensive to sit on, was beginning to change. Charlotte had replaced the jagged metal sculptures with soft cream-colored rugs. Nursery furniture was arriving daily, a hand-carved crib, a rocking chair, plush toys. But peace. Charlotte was learning was expensive. She sat on the terrace, wrapped in a cashmere throw, watching the city lights of New York blink on. Her phone buzzed on the glass table. It was Lucas, again. 14 missed calls, 6 voicemails. She didn't answer. She hadn't spoken to him since the day he was thrown out of the building. Sebastian had handled the lawyers, the restraining orders, and the press. "You should block him," a voice said from the doorway. Charlotte turned. Sebastian was standing there. He had let himself in with his key, a habit she found she didn't mind. Tonight he looked tired. The top button of his shirt was undone, his tie loose, a rare sign of humanity in the machine. "I keep thinking he might say something important," Charlotte admitted, looking back at the phone. "Like he's sorry." Sebastian walked over and poured himself a glass of water from the carafe on the table. "Lucas isn't sorry, Charlotte. He's broke. There's a difference." He sat down opposite her. "I have news. The tabloids are running a story tomorrow. Sophia sold an interview to the Daily Gossip." Charlotte's stomach tightened. "What did she say?" "The usual lies," Sebastian said, waving his hand dismissively. "That I've always lusted after you. That I engineered the breakup to steal his family. That you and I are having a torrid affair." Charlotte let out a dry, humorless laugh. "An affair? I'm 8.5 months pregnant. I can barely tie my shoes, let alone have an affair." "Truth doesn't sell magazines," Sebastian said. "But I've already had my legal team draft a defamation suit. It won't see the light of day for long. However," he paused, his dark eyes searching hers, "it might get loud for a few days. Paparazzi, reporters. I want you to move to the estate in the Hamptons until the baby comes. It's gated. Secure." "I can't run away, Sebastian," Charlotte said softly. "This is my home now. I need to stand my ground. For the baby." Sebastian looked at her, really looked at her with a mixture of respect and something softer. "You've changed, Charlotte. When you married Lucas, you were quiet, meek, invisible," Sebastian corrected. "Now, you are formidable." Their moment was interrupted by a commotion from the elevator lobby. The penthouse had a private elevator coded for security. But suddenly the doors pinged open. "I live here. You can't keep me out of my own house." Lucas stormed into the living room. He looked like a ghost of his former self. His designer suit was wrinkled and stained. He hadn't shaved in days. Behind him, a flustered doorman was trying to grab his arm. "Mr. Rochefort, please, I told you. Get off me." Lucas shoved the man away and marched onto the terrace. When he saw Sebastian sitting there, his face twisted into a sneer. "I knew it," Lucas spat, pointing a shaking finger. "Cozying up to her already. Did you wait even 5 minutes?" Sebastian stood up slowly, placing his glass down. "How did you get up here, Lucas?" "I still know the override code," Lucas shouted. He turned to Charlotte, his eyes wild. "Charlotte, baby, listen to me. You have to stop this. Mom is driving me crazy. I'm sleeping on a twin mattress, me a Rochefort." "You are not a Rochefort," Sebastian said, his voice dropping to that dangerous low rumble. "Not anymore. You were bought out." "I'm talking to my wife," Lucas yelled, stepping toward Charlotte. "Charlie, look at me. I made a mistake, Sophia. She meant nothing. She was a distraction. The stress of the merger. I wasn't myself. But I love you. I love our son." Charlotte looked at the man she had spent 3 years trying to please. She looked at his desperate eyes, his trembling hands, and she realized something profound. She didn't hate him. She pitied him. "You don't love us, Lucas," Charlotte said, her voice steady. "You love the lifestyle. You love the credit card. You love the way I looked on your arm at galas." "That's not true." Lucas fell to his knees, grabbing her hand. "I need you. Please. Just tell Sebastian to release my trust fund. Tell him to give me my seat back. We can be a family again." "Let go of her," Sebastian warned, taking a step forward. "No." Lucas tightened his grip, hurting her. "She's my wife. She listens to me." "Lucas, you're hurting me," Charlotte cried out, trying to pull her hand away. "You ungrateful." Lucas raised his hand, a reflex born of frustration and alcohol. He never got the chance to finish the thought. Sebastian moved with a speed that defied his size. He didn't punch Lucas. That would be too crude. Instead, he grabbed Lucas by the back of his collar, and his belt lifted him off the ground, as if he weighed nothing, and slammed him against the glass railing of the terrace. The city of Manhattan sprawled 50 stories below. Lucas stared down into the abyss, his feet dangling. Seb. "Don't drop me," Lucas shrieked, flailing. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't." Sebastian hissed, his face inches from Lucas's. "You raise a hand to her, in my presence. I wasn't going to hit her, I swear." Lucas sobbed. "Get him out of here, Sebastian," Charlotte said, her voice trembling but firm. "Don't kill him. He's not worth the prison time." Sebastian held him there for 3 more seconds. 3 seconds that felt like a lifetime to Lucas, before throwing him back onto the terrace floor. "If you ever come within 500 feet of her again," Sebastian said, adjusting his cuffs, "I won't throw you off the balcony. I will destroy you in ways that make death look like a mercy. I will make you unhireable. I will freeze every asset you have left. I will erase you." Lucas scrambled to his feet, sobbing, and ran for the elevator. As the doors closed, Charlotte let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She swayed, grabbing her stomach. A sharp, searing sun shot through her abdomen. "Charlotte." Sebastian was at her side instantly, his hand on her arm. "Sebastian," she gasped, clutching his lapel. I think the stress." Water pooled at her feet. "The baby," she whispered. "He's coming." The drive to Mount Sinai Hospital was a blur of sirens and Sebastian's calm, commanding voice. He drove the car himself, his armored Mercedes Maybach weaving through New York traffic with the precision of a stunt driver. In the back seat, Charlotte breathed through the contractions, gripping the leather armrest until her knuckles turned white. We're 2 minutes out, Sebastian said, glancing in the rearview mirror. Hold on, Charlotte. You're doing perfectly. It's too early, she groaned. He's not due for 2 weeks. He's a Rochefort, Sebastian said, a hint of a smile in his voice. We're never late. We're early. When they pulled up to the emergency entrance, a team of nurses was already waiting with a wheelchair. Sebastian had called ahead. He lifted her out of the car and placed her gently in the chair. Mr. Rochefort, we'll take it from here, a doctor said. I'm coming with her, Sebastian said. Sir, usually only the father or husband. I am the next of kin. Sebastian interrupted his tone, leaving no room for argument. And I am not leaving her side. They wheeled her up to the VIP labor and delivery suite. The next 4 hours were a haze of pain, beeping monitors, and Sebastian's hand. He never let go of her hand. He didn't look at his phone. He didn't check the stock market. He wiped her forehead with a cool cloth. He fed her ice chips. He was the anchor in the storm. But outside the hospital, a different storm was brewing. Sophia and Lucas, fueled by rejection and desperation, had played their final card. They had tipped off every news outlet in the city. Breaking Rochefort. Love triangle explodes pregnant wife in labor as brother takes control. A crowd of paparazzi had gathered at the hospital entrance. Flashbulbs popped like lightning, and in the middle of it all, Lucas stood in front of a bank of microphones, looking mournful. I just want to see my son, Lucas told the cameras, wiping away a fake tear. My brother has locked me out. He's holding my wife hostage. I am the father. I have rights. Up in the delivery room, the noise of the world was muffled, but the tension was high. The baby's heart rate is dropping, the doctor said, her voice tight. The cord might be compressed. We need to push now, Charlotte, with everything you have. I can't, Charlotte cried, exhausted. I'm too tired. Yes, you can, Sebastian whispered, leaning close to her ear. You are the strongest woman I know. You stood up to Lucas. You stood up to Sophia. You can do this. Bring him into the world, Charlotte. Bring him to a world where he will be safe. Charlotte looked into Sebastian's eyes. She saw belief there, absolute, unwavering belief. She took a deep breath, gritted her teeth, and pushed. A minute later, a cry pierced the air, a loud, angry, beautiful cry. It's a boy, the doctor announced, lifting the tiny, wriggling infant. Charlotte collapsed back onto the pillows, tears streaming down her face. They cleaned the baby and placed him on her chest. He was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a tuft of dark hair. He's beautiful, Charlotte whispered. Sebastian stood by the bedside, looking down at the child. For the first time in his life, the billionaire looked struck dumb. He reached out a finger, and the baby's tiny hand wrapped around it. Sir, a nurse poked her head in the door. There is a Mr. Lucas Rochefort in the lobby. He has brought police officers. He claims he has a legal right to be in the room to sign the birth certificate. The bubble burst. The reality of the outside world crashed back in. Charlotte stiffened, clutching the baby tighter. I don't want him here. Not now. Sebastian's face hardened. The wonder vanished, replaced by the CEO mask. Stay here. Enjoy your son. I will handle this. Sebastian walked out of the delivery suite and took the elevator down to the lobby. When the doors opened, chaos erupted. Lucas was shouting at the hospital security, flanked by 2 confused-looking police officers and a swarm of reporters. There he is, Lucas shouted, pointing at Sebastian. The kidnapper. Sebastian walked into the center of the lobby. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look flustered. He held up a single manila envelope. "Officers," Sebastian said calmly, "before you assist this man in entering a secure medical ward, you might want to see this." He handed the envelope to the lead officer. "What is this?" Lucas demanded. "A restraining order," Sebastian said. "Granted by a federal judge 20 minutes ago, citing your threats of violence earlier this evening at the penthouse." "That's a lie!" Lucas screamed. "And—" Sebastian continued, looking directly at the cameras. "A copy of the prenuptial agreement amendment Lucas signed 2 years ago in exchange for a bailout on his gambling debts." Lucas froze. "In that amendment," Sebastian said, his voice carrying to every microphone, "Lucas Rochefort waived all parental rights and custody claims in the event of proven adultery and public endangerment of the spouse. We have the video of the jet. We have the testimony of your mistress. You have no rights here, Lucas." The police officer looked at the document, then at Lucas. "Is this your signature, sir?" Lucas stammered, his face pale. I didn't read it. I just needed the cash." "Please step back, sir," the officer said, stepping between Lucas and the elevators. "If you violate the restraining order, we will arrest you." The cameras turned on Lucas. The narrative flipped in an instant. He wasn't the victim. He was the gambler who sold his own child for a payout. "Go home, Lucas," Sebastian said, turning his back on him. "It's over." Sebastian returned to the elevator, leaving his brother, shouting into the void, drowning in the flashbulbs he had summoned himself. Back in the room, the silence had returned. Charlotte was nursing the baby. "Is he gone?" she asked. "He's gone," Sebastian said. He sat down in the chair next to the bed. "He won't bother you again." Charlotte looked down at her son. "I'm going to name him Leo," she said, "because he's going to be brave." "Leo?" Sebastian tested the name. "A strong name. Leo Rochefort." "No," Charlotte said softly. She looked up at Sebastian. "Not Rochefort. I don't want him to carry Lucas's name. I want him to have a fresh start." "He needs a legacy, Charlotte," Sebastian argued gently. "Then he can have yours," she said. Sebastian blinked. "Mine. You saved us," she said. "You're the only father figure he's ever going to know. I want him to be like you, not like him." Sebastian looked at the woman and the child. He had spent 40 years building an empire of cold, hard cash steel and logistics. He had never built a family. He had never thought he deserved one. "Leo," Sebastian whispered, reaching out to touch the baby's cheek again. The baby cooed, sleeping soundly, safe in the presence of the only monster who had ever learned to love. 18 months had passed since the incident on the Gulf Stream G650, but time in the world of the Rocheforts did not tick by in minutes and hours. It moved in quarters acquisitions and milestones. The setting for this particular milestone was the Rochefort estate in Tuscany. The late afternoon sun bathed the rolling vineyards in a golden hue that felt worlds away from the freezing tarmac of North Dakota. Charlotte stood on the terrace of the villa, watching a toddler wobble across the manicured grass. Little Leo, now a year and a half old, was chasing a golden retriever, his laughter ringing out like wind chimes. Sitting on the grass, abandoning his usual Italian suit for a linen shirt and chinos, was Sebastian. He was holding a rubber ball, encouraging the boy. "Go get it, Leo, show him who's boss." Sebastian cheered, his face breaking into a genuine grin that the board of directors would have paid millions to see. Charlotte leaned against the stone railing, sipping an iced tea. She felt a profound sense of peace, a feeling that still surprised her. For months after Leo's birth, she had waited for the other shoe to drop. She had waited for Lucas to find a loophole, for Sophia to sell another story for the media to turn on her. but the silence from her past life had been absolute. "You're thinking too loud," a voice rumbled. Charlotte blinked. Sebastian had walked up the stone steps, dusting grass off his knees. He stood beside her, looking out at the vineyards. "I was just thinking about how different this is," she said. 2 years ago, I was afraid to ask for a glass of water on my own husband's plane. Now, I own the vineyard." Sebastian chuckled softly. "You run the vineyard, Charlotte, and the foundation, and if I recall correctly, you ruthlessly negotiated the distribution deal with the French last week. You've become quite the shark." "I had a good teacher." She smiled, bumping his shoulder with hers. The intimacy between them had grown slowly, organically. There had been no grand declaration, no sudden romance, just 1,000 small moments of safety. Sebastian had been there for the sleepless nights with a colicky Leo. He had been there when she filed the final divorce papers. He had been the wall she leaned on until she learned to stand on her own. "Speaking of sharks," Sebastian said, his tone shifting slightly, "I received a report this morning about Lucas." Charlotte stiffened. "Is he trying to sue again?" "No." Sebastian shook his head, pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "He doesn't have the money for lawyers anymore. After the gambling debts swallowed his final settlement, and Sophia left him for that tech CEO in Silicon Valley, who, by the way, was just arrested for fraud, Lucas hit rock bottom." Sebastian handed her the paper. It was a photograph taken by a private investigator. It showed a man in a greeter's uniform standing outside a mid-range hotel in Las Vegas. He looked older, heavier. His hairline was receding, and the arrogant spark in his eyes was gone, replaced by the dull exhaustion of a man working a double shift. "He's a doorman?" Charlotte asked, disbelief coloring her voice. "Valet and doorman," Sebastian corrected. "He parks cars for people who have the life he threw away. He lives in a studio apartment off the strip. He has no trust fund, no access to the family accounts, and no one to bail him out." Charlotte stared at the photo. She looked for the anger she used to feel. She looked for the fear. She found neither. "Does he know about us?" she asked. "About Leo?" "He knows Leo exists," Sebastian said, "but he has never tried to reach out. I think the shame is finally enough to keep him away. Or perhaps he just knows that the restraining order is still very much active." Charlotte handed the photo back. "Burn it." Sebastian raised an eyebrow. "I don't want to see it," she said, turning back to look at her son playing in the grass. "He's a stranger to me. His misery doesn't make me happy, Sebastian. It just makes me grateful that I escaped." Sebastian nodded, a look of respect in his eyes. He took a silver lighter from his pocket, flicked the flame, and held the corner of the photograph until it caught fire. He dropped it into an ashtray, watching Lucas Rochefort turn to ash and smoke drifting away on the Tuscan breeze. "There is one more thing," Sebastian said, clearing his throat. He sounded uncharacteristically nervous. "We need to go back to New York tomorrow. The board is demanding a gala for the new hospital wing we funded." "I know," Charlotte said. "I have my dress ready." "The jet is prepped," Sebastian said. "The G650. Charlotte paused. She hadn't been on that specific plane since the flight, since the hair pulling, since the day her life broke apart and put itself back together. They had flown other planes, chartered other flights, but Sebastian had kept the flagship jet grounded for renovations. "It's different now," Sebastian promised. "I had the interior completely redone. No more beige, no more memories." "I'm not afraid," Charlotte said, and she meant it. "Let's go." The next morning, the G650 waited on the private airstrip in Florence. As Charlotte walked up the stairs carrying Leo on her hip, she braced herself for a flashback. But when she stepped inside, she gasped. The sterile corporate beige was gone. The cabin was now a warm mix of soft greys, navy blues, and rich walnut wood. The conference table where Sophia had sat was gone, replaced by a comfortable play area with soft mats for Leo. But the biggest change was in the atmosphere. The crew wasn't walking on eggshells. They were smiling. "Welcome back, Miss Charlotte," the flight attendant said warmly, the same attendant who had opened the door in North Dakota. She winked at Leo. "I have warm cookies in the oven." Charlotte settled into a wide leather seat. Sebastian sat across from her. As the plane taxied and took off, climbing smoothly into the clouds, Charlotte looked out the window. She remembered the reflection she had seen years ago, Sebastian watching her with a predatory gaze. She looked at the reflection now. Sebastian was watching her, but the look wasn't predatory. It was adoring. "Charlotte," Sebastian said over the hum of the engines. She turned to him. He was holding a small velvet box. Her heart skipped a beat. "Sebastian, I told you once that I protect what is mine." Sebastian said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I realized that was arrogant. You aren't something to be owned, Charlotte. You are the partner I never thought I'd find. You turned a house into a home. You turned a cold businessman into a father." He opened the box. Inside sat a ring that made Sophia's old jewelry look like costume plastic, a flawless emerald-cut diamond flanked by sapphires. "I don't want to just be Leo's uncle," Sebastian said. "And I don't want to just be your business partner. I want to be your husband, a real husband, one who respects you, who honors you, and who will never ever let you fall." Tears pricked Charlotte's eyes. She looked at the man who had pulled her from the wreckage of her marriage, who had stranded his own brother in a blizzard to save her dignity, who had loved her son as his own from the moment he took his first breath. "You already are," she whispered. "You've been my husband in every way that matters for a long time." "Is that a yes?" Sebastian asked, a rare vulnerability in his smile. "Yes." Charlotte laughed, wiping a tear. "Yes, you idiot." Sebastian slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He leaned across the aisle and kissed her a kiss that tasted of champagne victory and a future that was wide open. "Mommy," Leo chirped from the play area, holding up a toy airplane. Sebastian broke the kiss, laughing. He scooped Leo up and sat him on his lap. "Look, Leo," Sebastian said, pointing out the window at the endless blue sky. "Everything the light touches, we're going to build it better. For you." Charlotte watched them, her boys. The billionaire and the heir. The turbulence was gone. The storm was over. And at 40,000 feet, for the first time in her life, Charlotte Rochefort wasn't just flying, she was soaring. And that is how the tables turn. Lucas thought he held all the cards because he had the charm, and Sophia thought she had won because she had the audacity. But they forgot the golden rule of the Rocheforts. Loyalty is the only currency that matters. Sebastian didn't just save Charlotte because she was family. He saved her because he recognized her worth when her own husband treated her like a disposable accessory. In the end, Lucas lost his fortune, his family, and his future, ending up parking cars for the very people he used to look down on. Meanwhile, Charlotte didn't just survive, she thrived, proving that sometimes the best revenge isn't screaming or fighting back. It's living happily ever after, with the upgrade. What would you have done if you were Sebastian? Would you have left your brother in the snow? Or was that too harsh? And did Lucas deserve a second chance? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, karma, and billionaire justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.